Hi there, this is Bruno from Spainguru.es, and this is the Spanish Digital Nomad Visa webinar. This is version 5, completely updated, and we're gonna have first a presentation and then a Q&A session at the end. If there are any questions, please write them in the bottom right corner of your screen, adding a question mark at the end. A little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is relocating English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. So more than 10 years supporting expats moving to Spain, huge community of 150,000 members plus. And we host weekly immigration webinars, weekly newsletter, and we have wonderful reviews on Trustpilot and on Google. So you are in very good hands. Yeah. Spainguru.es is absolutely free. As I mentioned, a weekly newsletter with 15,000 readers, YouTube channel with more than 1,000 videos, one per day, 7,400 plus subscribers, a blog with more than 2,000 articles, and 6 really bi-weekly webinars, so 3 webinars per week. And the community, as you can see, there is a huge Spanish Digital Nomad Visa dedicated group with 19,000 members that I highly recommend you to join today. You can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. We have the Move to Spain checklist, Spain's destinations, budget tools, guides, as we said, the community and everything. But if you choose to go with expert professional help, I have personally vetted over the years all my partners that I recommend on the services tab on Spainguru.es, where you can find digital nomad visa experts, tax experts, so tax advisors, tax accountants, tax financial planners, okay, experts in US nationals, UK nationals, and generally foreigners moving to Spain, and knowledgeable about the digital nomad visa procedure and ramifications. If you need documentations, sworn translators, apostille services in the US and the UK, NIE and TIE services in Spain, and so much more. Health insurance for visas, including the digital nomad visa, if needed, and many other services, including logistics, money transfer services, learning languages, international moving services, parcel shipping, pet transportation, basically everything you need to move to Spain. So definitely worth spending some time checking out everything that I have personally vetted over the years. Many people ask me what's the difference between the tax advisors, tax accountants, or gestores in Spanish, and financial planners. So tax advisors, they will simulate your tax liabilities in Spain, comparing to your current ones in your origin country, and eventually will recommend you the best way to move to Spain. So it's a strategic view. The gestores or tax accountants, they will file your recurrent filings in Spain and also in the US. You can find on Spainguru.es. So they offer, let's say, a recurrent service for filings, okay, but they are not so strategic. They're just executing what they're being told, basically. And financial planners, they, let's say, tell you the best way to structure your move to Spain, the best way to keep your money, the best bank accounts, the best way to transform different products that you already have for your new life to Spain, etc. So also a strategic view. So all these experts complement themselves. So you just go to the services tab, tax advice, you will find them all. Now, the objectives of this webinar. What you'll learn today is how to qualify under the 2025 rules for the DNV, the documents you really need, how to apply from Spain or from a consulate, how taxes work, a simple explanation. I have a Spanish taxes webinar that you can join, and how renewals work, okay? And the content, we're gonna talk about key terminology we're gonna be mentioning in these slides, the requirements, employee versus freelancer, income and savings criteria, how to apply, the process, the timeframes, taxes, Beckham law, renewals, and frequently asked questions. Now, let's start with terminology. First of all, UGE is the government unit that evaluates your digital nomad visa application. They will focus on income, taxes, experience, and contracts validity. We have to say that their decisions vary, and making a strong documentation is the key to fast approvals. The average decision time in 2025 is 10 to 20 working days when applying from Spain if the application is strong. We're going to also mention apostilles. It's an international certification used to legalize documents issued outside of Spain. Okay? When there is no apostille available, these documents will need a legalization via the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the specific country that issued those documents. Sworn translators or traductor jurado. These are special translators appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs who have a valid electronic signature that provide a valid translation, an official translation accepted by all Spanish institutions, including UGE and consulates. You can send your documents digitally to sworn translators and you receive the signed translations, all digital. You don't need to send documents overseas or physical copies of the documents. Then, Autónomo. This is the self-employed legal status in Spain. What in the USA is the 1099. Certificate of coverage or A1. This is the Social Security certificate that the home country provides, okay? That exempts you from Spanish Social Security contributions. There needs to be a Social Security agreement between Spain and that country. So not all countries are accepted, but recently USA and Canada are accepted. UK has been accepted from the beginning, okay? And in USA, it's taking 8 weeks to obtain. In the UK, 16 weeks to obtain. So you need to plan in advance. Then we're going to talk about the empadronamiento or padrón. This is the municipal registration, where you generally, if you're going to rent a property, okay, you bring your rental contract to the city hall office, and they provide you with a one-page document that acts as a proof of address, okay? That later, when you go to obtain your residency card, normally it's going to be required, not everywhere. I mentioned the residency card. Now, the residency card is called TIE, okay, which is different from NIE. The TIE card is the plastic card with your picture on it, with a NIE number on it. We're going to talk about the NIE number that proves your residency status. This is the plastic card that you obtain at a national police station after you are in Spain. You only obtain the TIE card once you are in Spain, holding a residency. The NIE number is just a number, okay? It's not a plastic or physical card. It's just a number. When you obtain the digital nomad visa from Spain, the NIE number is assigned automatically. When you want to obtain the digital nomad visa from a consulate, you need to obtain the NIE number before, okay? And that can take up to 3 months to obtain. So you need to plan accordingly. So the NIE number is the unique identification number. Like, for example, Spaniards, we have a DNI, okay? And foreigners have a NIE number, okay? It is more or less the same, right? So it's the number that identifies you. And you can see here the plastic card. This is the TIE card. You can see underlined in red, it holds the NIE number, okay? And it states what type of residency status you have, okay? So this will be the physical representation of your residency permit. Now, let's talk about the updates in 2025, now entering soon in 2026. Very important, W-2 employees from the United States and Canada are now being accepted and eligible for the digital nomad visa as employees, okay? Who qualifies? Well, in order to qualify, you need to supply a certificate of coverage from the Social Security in your home country, right? So you need to plan accordingly to obtain this certificate of coverage. And providing or submitting the certificate of coverage to the UGE will avoid you from paying Social Security contributions, okay? Who may not qualify? Self-employed or S-Corp owners often don't meet the Social Security's US-based business criteria, and owning more than 25% of a company can trigger legal or tax issues in Spain. So if you are under any of those situations, always go with legal advice. And this is a little timeline on how to obtain the certificate of coverage from the states. It takes about 8 weeks. It needs to be started by the employer, can be done online or via snail mail. And let's continue with more changes to the visa in 2025. Now, they're stricter. More documents will require apostilles, especially company certificates. There's going to be stricter checks for business owners to prove that the company has real activity, and professional experience must be backed now by official evidence. Another thing is that it's important to understand that the 24% flat tax rate that once was promised to every digital nomad, it's far from being a reality. If you apply as a contractor, you will not very probably be eligible for this special tax regime known as the Beckham Law. Only if you apply as an employee, you could potentially be eligible, okay? This special tax regime, the most famous perk that has is that you pay only 24% flat tax rate on your employment income, and you won't pay income from other sources coming outside of Spain. You won't have to pay Spanish wealth tax from your assets located abroad. You won't have to submit the 720 form disclosing your assets abroad, and many other things, okay? But eligibility is only for employees, basically. Also, UGE decisions can be quite inconsistent. Everybody that is applying from Spain and seeing how UGE decides on several cases, sometimes they are quite erratic, so you have to be prepared to adapt and eventually reapply. Renewals are now also treated nearly the same as new applications, so you don't have to lose your attention. It's not just a mere paperwork. It is almost as a new application by itself, but from within Spain again. Now, more things, okay? We mentioned that more documents require apostille now, okay? So be careful with this, because many people who applied at the beginning before this happened have the idea that they won't have to obtain so many certificates, apostilles, etc. Now be careful, because for the renewals, they will be asking this, okay? Company registration certificates must be apostilled. Tax or social security reports used as work proof require apostille. This is the same as before. Marriage and birth certificates or civil partnership certificates will need apostilles, okay? This is, of course, if applicable, if you're applying with spouse, with family, or civil partners. Documents from outside of Spain must be legalized or apostilled. Translation must be official, sworn translators, when not in Spanish. But I will have a chart later on what documents require sworn translation versus normal translation or no translation whatsoever. More scrutiny for business owners. This is also another update. Authorities will require proof that your company is active and legitimate. So off-the-shelf and inactive companies are likely to be rejected. In the past, people use this type of companies to apply, but authorities want to make sure that the companies are really operating. So you may need to submit now company tax returns, invoices and contracts, proof of business expenses or investment, evidence of clients and services delivered. And if your company has your name or is family-owned, more scrutiny. For small self-owned companies, you will have to prove ownership, activity, and client relationships. So all these extra documentations will be expected. When you're proving work experience, as you know, you have two ways to apply: proving work experience or proving certain academical studies. In order to qualify without a degree, you will need to show at least 3 years of relevant professional experience. Now, what people are submitting now in order to be approved: a detailed letter from your former employers or clients where they outline your role, responsibilities, and the dates for those roles. Now, depending how you're applying as an employee or as a contractor, you will be required to provide official documentation to support all this. So depending on your work status, you will have access to different documentations to provide official support. For example, social security records from the UK, HMRC, USA, Social Security A750, or detailed report from your current or past companies, 1099 forms, tax documents, P60s, 1099, self-employment pages, invoices, and bank statements tied to your freelance work. All supporting documents must match your CV and current job role. So, to summarize, our experience must now be backed by official government documents. We mentioned that the special tax regime for Beckham law, basically eligibility is restricted to employees moving to Spain. Now, it's important also to underline that if you're making less than 60,000 euros of taxable income, it may be more beneficial for you from a tax perspective to enroll under the ordinary regime, because you may end up paying even less than the 24% effective tax rates for your income, because there are a few cons or disadvantages of the Beckham law, which, for example, you won't have allowances or deductions for family, or if you are just making less money, when you calculate the progressive tax brackets, you will end up paying less. So basically, you will consider going for the Beckham law if you're an employee, only if you're making, let's say, more than 55,000 euros. Okay, so that's very, very important to check with the tax advisor. We mentioned that the UGE can be quite erratic or quite unpredictable, so you need to be prepared, have the proper expectations, and it will, people are observing that depending who or which official is reviewing your case, the outcomes can be very different. Rejections may happen even with strong applications. Okay, so there's nothing 100% effective rate when you apply for this visa. And most of the time, if not always, it's better to reapply rather than appealing a decision, because appeal processes are extremely long, and people are left basically out in the dark when they appeal decisions. So it's just better to reapply. And we've seen decisions, people who reapplied without touching a single comma in their files, and they got approved just simply because the first thing that we mentioned, that maybe a different official just apply a different interpretation and basically approve them. So that can also happen happily. Okay, so yes. And also another thing that you need to have in mind is the calendar. In the summer and in Christmas time, it is holiday seasons, and the immigration offices are normally understaffed. So unfortunately, this brings several consequences. They may be stricter, they may have more rash decisions. So try to avoid those times of the year in order to apply. Now let's talk about the formal requirements for this visa. We're finished with the updates for this year. And now we're gonna go with the formalities established by the regulations and the law. First and most important, core eligibility criteria for the DMV is that you need to make at least, and there is here a little discussion, depending on who you ask, they will say 2,763 euros per month, minimum threshold for the main applicant. But some lawyers say that they have been successful applying with 2,600 euros. Okay, this is based on the minimum salary, or SME, in Spain, that normally is updated on February each year. No, it doesn't have to, but normally it is happening. And in the last years, they have been increasing it quite steeply. Okay, and all these numbers are before taxes and expenses. You need to prove that you are working remotely for a non-Spanish company, and that your clients are also from outside of Spain, with a maximum income of 20% coming from Spain. Okay, but you don't have to have income from Spain. It can be 100% from outside of Spain. Having either university degree or at least 3 years of relevant professional experience. Provide a clean criminal record for the past 5 years. So for every jurisdiction where you lived, you need to provide a police check. Prove that your employer or clients have existed for at least 1 year, and confirm that your work is performed remotely using digital tools. So not every job applies for or is eligible for this visa. Now let's go a little bit more in depth into the income requirements. We said that the SME, or the minimum salary in Spain, is the base for the calculation. So we need to follow this number and then apply the multipliers in order to get the minimum thresholds that will raise the more applicants you bring in one application. So for one applicant, we said 2,763 euros. Okay. And for a couple, so where does the 2,763 euros figure comes from? This is 200% of the 12 months minimum salary in Spain. But for the first dependent or couple, it will be 75% of this number, right? And then for each dependent after that, it will be just 25% of this number again and again. Yes, this is why we have like not round numbers for minimum thresholds. Remember that the amounts are gross before tax and expenses, and if also self-employed, income must be shown before deducting costs. Okay. So also, savings may help support your case. So if you are just a little bit below the financial threshold, you can prove that you have savings, okay, to match the minimum threshold, but it can never replace a consistent active income coming from remote activities. And people report that maximum you can just show 200 euros per month in savings. They tend to be more open to, let's say, closer to the 200 euros per month when you are coming with bigger family, okay, with more dependents, etc. But if you're coming along, we're quite strict and you shouldn't provide savings. It should always be active income, okay? And you need to document this income through contracts, payslips, invoices, and bank statements. Now, let's go through the application checklist. What documents you need to submit? You'll need a signed letter from your employer or main client confirming your role, job title, job description, pay in euros. Always all the figures need to be in euros. This is important. Remote work authorization from Spain and confirmation the arrangement is long-term. Your contract, your work contract, ideally without a fixed end date, because if you're applying from Spain, that will enable you to obtain the maximum length of approval, which is 3 years residency. If you're applying from a consulate, you will get 1 year regardless. Also, if you're applying a certificate of coverage, even if you have a, let's say, without a contract with a fixed end date, if your certificate of coverage ends before, then usually you will obtain the residency when the certificate of coverage ends. And you need to be prepared to have a solution or a pathway to continue with your residency afterwards. Let's continue. Last 3 months of stamped and signed or signed personal bank statements showing income, last 3 months of payslips and invoices, company certificate with apostille now, proving your employer or client has existed for at least 1 year, proof of qualifications or the 3+ years of relevant experience, criminal background check and signed declaration, private health insurance in some cases, passport application form, payment receipt and photo. Each document will need to be some translated or normal translation. We're going to see that later. And apostille legalized if required. Now, if you're applying as an employee, okay, this is for W-2s in the US and providing a certificate of coverage or A1 certificates. Your employer will have to confirm your remote status and your job duties. So the agreement between Spain and your home country not only needs to be over the Social Security certificate, but also about the remote status of the role, okay? W-2 form can support your income, but it's not enough by itself. So you need to provide the certificate of coverage that proving that you're paying Social Security in your home country, okay? If you cannot provide this certificate of coverage, then Spain gives you 2 options. Either you convince your employer to open a company in Spain so that they can pay your Social Security contributions through the Spanish system from Spain, or you switch to a 1099 or contractor to become an Autónomo in Spain and pay your taxes as Autónomo and your Social Security security contributions as Autónomo. Okay, and there is also an optional and helpful documentation that you can provide, which is a signed letter confirming no impact on Spain's labor market. That can also help. Now, some people are, let's say, advantages and have the possibility to choose whether to apply as an employee, okay, providing a certificate of coverage, or switching to a self-employed status. There are advantages and disadvantages for each of these two pathways. Here's a table that compares them, okay? But it's a bit long, so we're not gonna go through this. You can watch the recording that I will send you later on. You can watch it again and check it out if you're in this situation. We mentioned that now the certificate of coverage of the US, UK are accepted, Canada as well, and also other countries. Okay, this is important to mention. And be sure to allow time to obtain them. It can take several weeks. It can take a couple of months, 3 months to obtain. So you need to plan very well before traveling to Spain, if you're applying from Spain, to have this correct documentation and that it is valid at the time of submission, okay? This is important. And what we mentioned, if the certificate of coverage expires, okay, probably they will give you the residency until the date in which expires. We've seen cases of people who got residency for 3 years, but the certificate of coverage expiring after only 2 years, and asking like, should I do something? Should I continue being in Spain without certificate of coverage? And the answer is no, definitely not, because you would have a gap in coverage, and that would be against you are responsible to, let's say, having a proper residency status with all the guarantees, including the social security coverage. And also, if you are going for the long-term residency later on, this will be a problem later on. So be careful with that. Of course, the certificate of coverage is an official document that needs to be sworn, translated, and apostilled. We're going to all have everything there in one single table, okay? Now, we mentioned that the two pathways, if you don't get a certificate of coverage, one pathway is convincing the employer to open a company in Spain, but this tends to be a complex and costly process, and not many want to go this way. Therefore, many applicants will switch to self-employed status to avoid this requirement entirely. When you do this, you're going to go self-employed, okay? And then you're going to have different things that you need to do and different timeframes as well. So registering as Autónomo in Spain will mean that you will have to start paying Spanish social security system, okay? And you will also have to file regular tax declarations, not only annually, but also quarterly. You will have to pay income tax quarterly, and you will have to also file and potentially pay VAT as well, quarterly and annually, okay? Now, depending whether you get your residency, your digital nomad visa from a consulate or from within Spain, you will have different time frames, okay, when you need to register as Autónomo, okay? But very important, you don't register as Autónomo until you get your visa approved, your residency approved, okay? And if you already come with a digital nomad visa approved from outside of Spain, you will have up to 30 days to complete the process of registering as Autónomo, and then later to get the TIE card, okay? What the law says is that you need to register as Autónomo as soon as possible. If you get your digital nomad visa from within Spain, then immediately you need to start the process to register as Autónomo, okay? Now, the expenses that you will have as Autónomo, we mentioned social security contributions. That will start around 80 euros for the first year, and then the second year will get leveled to the income level that you have, okay? Normally, we'll go around 300 euros, but it can be more, and we're talking about monthly payments, okay? Also, you need to consider and budget accounting fees, because filing taxes in Spain is quite complex, and I've been doing it for several years. I have had businesses. I've been Autónomo for several years. I'm a Spanish speaker, and I have certain knowledge about this, and still it is for me very, very difficult to keep up with all the changes. It is very complex. So I highly recommend you going with professionals who will file your taxes on your behalf, because you risk really making very costly mistakes. Okay, so yes, that would be my advice. And if you need, of course, any of the professionals, I have vetted professionals on Spainguru.es. I personally use one of the, let's say, online accountants that I have, tax down, that you can find on Spainguru.es, but I have 3 of them, okay, that you can choose from. Now, important thing and very important question that people in Spainguru's community group asks: do I need to have the TIE card or the physical residency card to register as Autónomo? Okay, many people think that they need to have in their hands the TIE card before registering as Autónomo. And why do they think this? Because many gestores who are not used to work with digital nomads, okay, unfortunately, will tell them wrongly that they need to have a TIE card before. Truth is that there is a huge bottleneck here with appointments with police stations who take your fingerprints and will produce the TIE card for you, okay? And that can take weeks or even months. And the law says that you need to register as Autónomo as soon as possible. So it is important, and it is very possible, and it is necessary that you register as Autónomo as soon as possible, and the TIE card comes later, okay? So be careful if your gestor or tax accountant tells you otherwise, because it's not the way it works, and it can have strong implications for your future in Spain, not having complied with the registration of Autónomo immediately. Can a criminal record affect your application? The answer is yes. Background checks are mandatory. First of all, you need to apostille and sworn translate, and you need to provide all the police checks if you were living in different countries or in the country where you lived the past 5 years, okay? And what the UGE will look is at even minor offenses who can trigger delays or rejections. They will search for serious criminal convictions, fraud, drug-related offenses, repeated offenses, okay? What I recommend you is, like, if you have criminal records, this is not a straightforward case, please go with legal advice, okay? And also consider that not every record will pose a problem. If you have minor stuff like DUI or smoking pot many years ago, stuff like that, that potentially will be overlooked. But this is important, that if you have anything in your police check, that you go with legal expertise, okay? And also, it's helpful to sign a declaration confirming that you don't have any pending criminal charges from the moment in which you got your police checks and the moment in which you are submitting the application. Now, remember that after this presentation, there is a Q&A session, okay, where you can ask anything. And if you're enjoying this information, if you're watching this video on YouTube, of course, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about the digital nomad visa, please ask it in the comments. And if you think that information what I'm sharing with you today is helpful, please leave a Trustpilot review. It really makes a world of difference to me, really motivates me, and it is a way to say thank you for this information that I'm sharing with you. Now, let's continue. Do you need a degree? Alternatives that work. Of course, not only you can apply with a degree, but also you can apply with 3 years of relevant experience. Now, if you go with the degree pathway, there is first option, a university diploma, okay, in a relevant field. It could be university diploma, master's, PhD, etc. Must be legalized and officially translated. Degrees must be a graduate and postgraduate level, as we said, from recognized institutions as well, and related to the job that you are applying with, okay? And the option 2 is at least 3 years of professional experience, okay? That can have to be also related directly to the remote work you will be doing in Spain. And as we said, you need to provide supporting evidence of this experience. How you prove freelance or contract experience? Okay, if you're applying as a freelancer or contractor, you can prove by submitting a detailed CV aligned with your application with a normal translation, include client letters confirming work history, scope, and timelines, and as we said, official documentation that proves those that relevant experience, okay? The best way to organize the documentation is either by client or by year, and even potentially providing an explanation on how you are ordering all this information, which can be quite extensive. And consistency is very important. Everything has to match, okay? Because they will be checking that there is no like different roles or an experience that is not related to the role that you are applying with, etc., etc. And the more formal and verifiable the experience is, the stronger your application will be. Very important, and one of the perks of the digital nomad visa. Can you bring your family? These are the rules for spouses and partners. You can include a spouse or legally registered partner, okay? And the spouse will have full work rights in Spain, okay? So 100% of the income can come from Spanish clients, okay? So actually more work rights than the main applicant that can only have up to 20% of Spanish income. You can bring also a registered partner. So even if you're not married, there is a pareja de hecho, okay, or stable partnership or legal partnership recognized by Spain if you can prove it. Children under 18 you can bring, and also adult children and parents in specific and dependent situation we're going to see later on. To include a partner or spouse, you must provide a marriage certificate that needs to be updated, so a new official copy, okay, or civil partnership certificate, always apostilled by the authorities that issued it. For example, if you got married in California state, the US, it will be the state apostille, in fact. Or if you're married in Cyprus, it must be Cyprus apostille, and sworn translated into Spanish when it's not in Spanish. Proof of shared finances or cohabitation. This is if you're applying as an unmarried couple, you need to make the case that you are a couple. The best way is to provide legal partnership, but if you don't have a legal partnership, you need to prove, and the strongest is cohabitation. Okay, and even if you have children together, cohabitation proof is the best proof. Okay, so what can you provide is lease agreements, joint bills, shared bank accounts, etc. Also, we mentioned that you can bring children, adult dependents, and elderly parents. In the case of married children, you will need birth certificates, also sworn, translated, and apostilled. Proof of financial support and school plans will be helpful. And then if you're bringing adult children, what are adult children? When they are over 18 years old. But there are two different groups: when they are under 26 or over 26. If they are between 18 and 26, you must show full-time studies, financial dependence, proof of living with parents, okay? Normally a certificado de soltería, they're not married, okay? So they're part of the same family unit, okay? This will be helpful. And if they are over 26, okay, only will be allowed when they're medically or incapably dependent, and you will need to provide official incapacity documentation. For adopted children, you will need to include a court ruling confirming legal guardianship or adoption. And if you're bringing parents or in-laws, you need to prove real, stable financial and physical dependence, such as full support via bank transfers, okay? So this is something also that changed. You need to show that you are sending money to the parent or in-laws to prove that they depend financially on you. And each case will be assessed individually, right? So this is important as well. You need to prepare in time in order to make a strong case to bring elderly people or elderly dependents. Now, it is also common that the main applicant applies from within Spain for the digital nomad visa, but then you want to add family members later on. And this is possible, but you will need extra documentation and respect a specific time frame. For self-employed applicants, you must be fully registered as Autónomo before they can apply, and this can take time. As dependents can successfully apply while still in their home country, but for the passport holders that need a Schengen visa, it's important that they may still need a Schengen visa to enter Spain to then get to the TA appointment, okay? So be careful with that. Do you need private health insurance? Let's explain by case. So almost everybody is covered by the public healthcare system in Spain via paying Social Security, either in Spain or via the certificate of coverage of a country with an agreement with Spain, okay? So if you're covered with a certificate of coverage, you will not be required this private health insurance. If you register as a self-employed in Spain, you will start to pay your monthly social security contributions that include access to Spanish public healthcare system. Therefore, you don't need, okay, to go with a private health insurance. Okay, if neither of these situations applies, you will need a compliant health insurance that has no co-payments or deductibles, that offers full coverage in Spain, is valid for the entire duration of your visa, at least 1 year. Okay, and this provided by a company authorized to operate in Spain. Now, there's something also that not many people talk about. If you plan to stay in Spain for the long term, and after 5 years of legal residency, you can be eligible to apply for the long-term residency, which is a much better type of residency compared to any other residency because it is much more flexible. You have full work permit in Spain. You can leave Spain for longer time. You're almost, you have the same rights as a Spanish citizen, almost, okay? So definitely, if you plan to stay for the long term, going for the long-term residency, it is one of the goals that you need to, I think about. There is a common mistake, which is if you apply for the digital nomad visa from within Spain, the day that they grant you the visa is the day that your residency starts. Now, if you're applying as an autónomo and you have first received the grant of a visa and started your residency, and then you register as autónomo, and then you start paying social security, you have had a gap in healthcare coverage. Okay, so if you have this gap, this would be a problem later on when you apply for the long-term residency, right? So that time will not count. If you want to avoid having that gap, then it's better to have a private health insurance coverage, okay? Then if not, the clock will start counting later. So be careful with that. And it's important to count all the time that you can, because other requirements for a long-term residency is that you have to have an uninterrupted legal residency, okay, during this 5 years. So no gaps in residency status. And also there is a minimum stay requirement or a maximum time outside of Spain required, which is you can only be outside of Spain for less than 10 months in the previous 5 years. Maximum 12 if you can prove it was for work, okay? But be careful because they are quite strict about this. And in any, you can share those 10 months the way you want during those 5 years, but they can never be in blocks of more than 6 months, okay? So you have several requirements for long-term residency, and it's important to plan ahead. If you need a compliant health insurance, I probably work with the best exclusive agent out there who offers Adeslas, Mr. Carlos Blanco. I have been recommending him for several years. He's fantastic. He's also an immigration lawyer, okay? And he can provide you not only advice on the health insurance side of things, but also on the immigration side of things. So he knows this visa very well, and he understands exactly your use case to provide you with the best solutions possible. So definitely, if you go to spainguru.es/health insurance, you'll find his contact, and you can contact him and maybe fill a form, receive a non-binding quote for your needs. And of course, it is absolutely free to do so to get at least his first impression. You always get a free phone call, and he can always advise on how you do things. Now, let's continue. Essential extras, entry stamps, apostilles, and translations. Now, when you apply, especially when you apply from Spain, okay, but also if you apply from the consulate, when you later apply for the TA card, you need to have a date of entry in Spain and not the Schengen area or Europe. Spain, you need to prove the date that you enter Spain. So be careful with that. Because if you enter Spain from outside of Schengen, perfect. First of all, Schengen is a 29 country in Europe group that is internally borderless. So when you enter Schengen, okay, you will get a stamp on your passport, or with the new entry-exit system, they will scan your face, fingerprints, etc., and that will count as a stamp, right? So if you enter directly from outside of Schengen into Spain, Spain will know exactly when you enter Spain. Now, what happens when you enter from outside of Spain, but inside of Schengen? Yes. If you, for example, fly from New York to Frankfurt, you will get a stamp into Schengen from German authorities. But once you fly to Spain, you will not have an immigration control. Or if you go to Italy and then you drive all the way, you won't have immigration control when you cross the border between France and Spain, right? So you need to have proof of your entry into Spain, either to apply for the digital nomad visa or later on to get your TIE card at the police station. Yes? So the best way to do it is to get a declaración de entrada, okay, which is a one-page document that you fill up, you bring it to the closest police station to the border or inside the airport where you arrived, and you make it stamp. You get a stamp with a date, and that's an official proof of your entry in Spain. This is important. We mentioned the apostilles. Basically, every official certificate needs an apostille or a legalization when the apostille is not available. Sworn translations are needed for all the official documents and normal translation for documents that are not official, like the curriculum or CV. Okay, and all the forms, of course, need to be fully completed, and everything has to be done without errors because those can cause delays, etc. Now, here's the chart I was mentioning before, a specific list of documents that require apostille and sworn translation. You can see the current freelance or employment contract doesn't need an apostille, but it does need a sworn translation. Letter from client authorizing remote work doesn't need apostille, but does need a sworn translation. And you can see certificate of incorporation. You will need apostille and sworn translation. The criminal background check will need apostille and sworn translation. Marriage and birth certificates or legal partnership certificate, apostille and sworn translation. Educational credentials, apostille and sworn translation. Official government documents for proof of work, apostille and sworn translation. Previous certificate of employment doesn't need apostille, but it does need sworn translation. Financial documents doesn't need anything, okay? Just the financial documents as long as they are in English, okay? And curriculum or CV, no apostille, but simple translation. And insurance doesn't need apostille or sworn translation. Only, of course, when you're applying with an employee without a specific certificate of coverage that will enable to access public healthcare system in Spain. Topping up income with savings. We mentioned that people say that maximum 200 euros per month. This type of visa is based on active remote income, okay? And basically, savings has to be a minimal share of your financial threshold. They tend to be more open when you apply as a family. The more dependents, the more they let you add savings, but people talk about a threshold of 200 euros per month maximum, okay? What would count as savings? Bank statements with your name, fixed terms deposits or investment accounts, proof of consistent ownership, and access. So we mentioned already when you should register as Autónomo, the time frame. Slide 46. I need to delete one. It's a bit redundant. And now let's talk about the pros and cons of applying from Spain or from outside. Now, the advantages of applying from Spain are many. Okay, so most people, okay, apply from Spain, but of course it's not for everyone because depending what passport you hold, maybe you would need to apply from outside because you will require a Schengen visa to enter Spain before. So, for example, if you are from Philippines, you will need a Schengen visa to enter Spain in order to be able to apply from Spain. And sometimes that can be more cumbersome than applying from a consulate abroad. Now, if you can enter Spain as a tourist, okay, with Schengen visa or without, there are several advantages. First of all, you don't need to wait in your home country, okay? First of all. Second, faster appointment scheduling. Basically, you don't need an appointment to apply online at the UGE portal from within Spain, whereas with the consulates, you need to get an appointment, and that can be a huge bottleneck. Then the process from UGE in Spain is more streamlined. It's not perfect, and as we said, can be quite erratic, okay? But compared to consulates, it is extremely streamlined. The consulates have very different interpretations, less knowledge of the rules. They don't have so much workload as the UGE that basically does this procedure and other procedures, but they're used to get this type of procedures all the time, whereas other consulates don't. Okay, so it is better in that sense. There is also greater control over your move, because once you're applying from within Spain, you can already parallelly do other things for your settling in Spain, like housing, finding schools, taking care of logistics, while waiting for the approval. Also, there is an easier family reunification later. Once you're approved, your family members can join as dependents, respecting the different timeframes, as we mentioned before. No medical certificate or income tax return to prove income, okay, where some consulates will require you this, for example, in Philippines. Approval with an indefinite contract can grant you residency for 3 years, as we mentioned, instead of 1, which is the maximum from a consulate abroad. Guarantee of approval by administrative silence after not responding in 20 working days. So if you don't get an answer, you are automatically approved. Whereas from consulates, this really doesn't work. And there's a faster turnaround of around 1 to 2 months, officially 20 working days from Spain. Okay. Whereas from consulates, it can take any time, really. Okay. It can be anything. So there are also disadvantages from applying from Spain. For example, there is a strict 90-day window from which you can apply. Now, once you apply and you're still waiting a decision, basically you can stay in Spain. This is also important to mention. But you need to apply during a valid period in which you can be in Spain, usually 90 days in a 180-day running period, the Schengen rules. There is an entry proof required that we mentioned before. You need a stamp or a declaración de entrada or scan by EES system. The visa will start immediately, which can be a problem. As we mentioned, it could be a gap for you in healthcare coverage, etc., if you're not prepared. So you cannot really choose when or suggest, like in the consulate, like when you want your visa to start. And if you apply from Spain, the appeal process is basically non-existent. The best and what everybody recommends is to reapply again. Okay. Whereas from the consulates, maybe the appeal process can be more something more valid of an option. I asked this in the group, whether you apply from Spain or from a consulate abroad, and about 78% of people said that they're applying from Spain and 22% were applying from abroad. The typical timeline is, first of all, you prepare your documents. Depending on your status, you need to assign the different timeframes if you need a certificate of coverage. But basically, you need to be working for at least 3 months as well, getting pay slips for 3 months. And of course, just getting the documentation can take time, and the apostilles and the sworn translations can take time. Then you travel to Spain. If you're applying from Spain, you submit the application immediately. You await the resolution, as we said, up to 20 business days. And then hopefully you receive your residency. Then you will register as Autónomo if applicable. You will always have to get your residency card later on, and then prepare for renewal when your card expires. Now, is it possible to work with individuals, not only with companies, as clients? You can apply even if your clients are individuals or sole traders, but the key is to prove that the relationship is stable, long-term, and remote. Have to include invoices with client names, proof of regular payments, written confirmation from the client about the work you do. For multiple smaller clients, show consistent income across several months and avoid contracts that suggest that you are doing work for Spanish-based individuals unless clearly allowed. Also, people ask whether you can work for NGOs, and it is possible, and it's acceptable if they operate like a company, showing consistent activity, legal status, and financial transactions. So definitely possible. We mentioned that almost nobody can get the TA card when they're supposed to. They're very hard to get appointments at national police stations. What can you do to get hold of one of those appointments or get your TA cards? Okay, so normally there are delays, especially in cities with high demand like Valencia, Madrid, Barcelona, Malaga. All these cities have strong demand and strong wait lists for the long wait list for the appointments for the TA card. Valencia is crazy now. Several months can pass without having an appointment. So, but it's important to understand that authorities know this. Actually, there is a demonstration in front of the Ministry of Inclusion on the 22nd of November at noon, if I'm not wrong. I have an article on Spainguru that I published yesterday in Madrid, okay, in Santiago Abascal, I think it is, number 39, okay, that you can go to complain, organized by one of the biggest immigration lawyers in Spain, to complain about the problems of appointments at the police stations for the TIE cards, because this is really, the system is collapsed, really. This is the situation. So if you happen to be in Madrid and you think this affects you, definitely please consider going to that demonstration, okay, in order to push a little bit things over. Now, remember, even if you don't get the appointment, even if you don't have a physical card, your residency still exists. You are a legal resident in Spain. It's just that you don't have the plastic card to show it to an authority, okay? But the moment in which you have it, it will show your date in which your residency was granted, okay? Now, what you can do to get the appointments is like check the appointments daily in different times of the day. There are many people in the group telling how they got their appointments. You can also be flexible and try to get appointments at police stations in nearby towns. Okay, it has to be in the same province in which you are living, because many of those police stations will require an empadronamiento, but many police stations also, although there are, let's say, a smaller part, won't require you an empadronamiento. For example, Malaga police station, the main police station in Malaga, doesn't require an empadronamiento. If you show a rental contract, they will consider that as a proof of address, and that will be fine. So it's always important that you check, once you get an appointment, whether that station has a requirement of an empadronamiento, or always try to get an empadronamiento regardless. There's also a little hack, which is getting your TA in Madrid and Barcelona via the UGE, okay, because the interesting part is that in Madrid and Barcelona, they will not ask you for an empadronamiento. So you can potentially go to those cities, stay one night in a hotel, go to your TA appointment, get your TA card without showing the empadronamiento. You don't have to be living in those cities and still get your TA card. So if you want to know more, you can watch this video. There's the QR code where I talk about it. Otherwise, there's the normal procedure to get your TA card, which I also have an article and a video explain you how to do it. Now, let's talk a little bit about taxes and Social Security. So let's go to Social Security first. What do you pay during year 1 versus year 2 onwards, okay? As we said, you start low with 80 euros or 100 euros per month, and maybe depending on the region where you are living, there is the option to get that first year paid back if you request it, okay? It's called Cuota Cero, okay? This is to help Autónomos to start. On the year 2, however, they will look at how much income you made in year 1, and they will establish, well, I don't know really, like they don't look at the income, but they will raise it basically to 300 euros. This is what happened to me. I don't know based exactly on what, but they raise it to 300 euros per month, okay? And then on the third year, they will look at how much income you are making, and they have a scale on your Social Security contributions, how much you need to pay per month, basically, okay? What gives you, what rights do you get when you pay for the Social Security in Spain? Access to the public healthcare system, full coverage for every treatment, subsidized medicines, and you get retirement and disability coverage, parental leave, sickness benefits, although it is hard and not great when you get sick as an autónomo. It's not very good, the coverage that you get. There are many complex rules about that, but don't count too much on it, okay? Many people say that as an autónomo, you should not get very sick in terms of sick leaves, okay? Of course, you get coverage while one of the top public healthcare systems in the world, okay? But the sick leaves are not great for the autónomos. This is at least my personal opinion. Also, lately has been a lot of scandal, I would say, about a government announcement of a proposal from the government to raise the Social Security contributions a lot, and not only raising the numbers of each of the thresholds, but also, let's say, that with the previous system, the autonomous could choose how much to contribute in the social security contributions. If you contributed more, you could then get more pension later on. Or if you have parental leave, you will get more payment when you are under the parental leave and everything. But you had, let's say, the possibility to pay less or more. You decided. Now there's been an agreement, okay, between the government and certain organizations of autonomous in order to that basically the level of your income will decide the contributions that you have to pay for the social security. You cannot really choose it. Not only that, but they also are raises. Okay, so now this is under discussion, and there's been a lot of scandal because initially the government proposed a very steep increase for the different income levels. You can see there. Okay, so if you're paying the highest one for about 590 euros, it was going to go at almost 800 euros per month. Okay, but this has not really gone through, and now they're proposing to raise, but not so much. Okay, so they are under discussions. The fact is that really there is a plan that has to end by year 2032. Okay, and these raises, they need to happen, yes or yes. The question is whether the government will apply these rises immediately, let's say aggressively, okay, over the years, or low at the beginning and higher later on, but the races will happen. Okay, this is already agreed. The question is how fast they're going to reach those goals. Now let's talk about the Spanish progressive tax system. Many taxes have a progressive tax system, including the income tax. Okay, the general income tax is taxed at progressive rates starting at 19%, going up to 47%, depending on the taxable income. Okay, so many people ask, looking at the brackets, if I make 100K taxable income, will I have to pay 45% tax? This is the very initial conclusion, looking at the tax brackets without knowing how they work. If you see, the fifth tax bracket starts at 60,000 euros and goes up to 300,000 euros. So like, if I make 100K, will I pay 45% tax? Well, the answer is happily not. You will not pay that, because the way it works is that they calculate different tax rates for the income that you are making. We start with the first 12,000 euros, 450 that you make, you will pay 19% tax on those. Then if you make 7,750 euros more, you will pay 24% tax. For the following 15K, you will pay 30% tax. So in the end, you will be paying, let's say, an average or median of the tax rates of the different brackets. Therefore, for 100K, you will be paying about 36% effective tax break. This is illustrative purposes, ballpark figures, without counting for allowances or deductions or anything, just for the purpose of explaining you how the progressive tax brackets work. So if you make 30K, you will be paying 24%. If you're making 40K, 26%, and going up depending on how much income you are making. Now, let's talk about the tax calendar for autonomous. As we said, tax for autonomous, you need to file taxes and pay taxes quarterly and annually like everyone else. So you need to file quarterly income and VAT, and annually you will file VAT, annual VAT, in January the following year, and the annual income tax is deadline on the 30th of June of the following year. Also, once you become a Spanish tax resident, you have to disclose your overseas assets if any of the assets categories are over 50,000 euros. For example, a category is bank accounts. Another one is real estate. Okay, so if you have two bank accounts with 25,000 euros each, the total category is worth 50,000 euros. Therefore, you need to declare the existence of those two bank accounts. Okay, again, please use a gestor or tax advisor to handle these filings because it is very, very complex. I tried to do it myself, and basically it was impossible. I didn't understand very well, and the mistakes can be extremely costly. Also, many people ask in the community how much money really will actually make it to their pockets after paying all this. So you need to budget for your income tax. Not only that, also the Social Security contributions. As we said, depending on which year you are, the Social Security contributions will be different. They will be going up, okay? And also, the more money you make, the more effective tax rate you will be paying. So again, this is for illustrative purposes only. If you're making the minimum financial threshold for this visa, 2,750 euros, round numbers, you'll be paying on the third, after the third year, okay, on the third year, 440 euros per month. If the government doesn't raise us the Social Security contributions much more, but they will, you'll be paying about income tax 407 euros, okay, and you will take home a little less than 2,000 euros, okay, the income tax 15%, okay, and the total deduction will be around 31%. So basically, consider that for the first threshold of the digital nomad visa, that you will be making net 69% of your gross income, okay, for illustrative purposes. And that, of course, will go up, okay, the take that you need to pay the more you make. If you want to know more about taxes, okay, you can join my bi-weekly webinar that I hold, okay, on Spainguru.es. It is absolutely free. You get a recording at the end, and you can ask any question related to taxes. And not only I talk about digital nomads, but in general about many other taxes, about Spanish tax residency, etc., etc. So much more information. Now let's talk about the visa duration and renewal timeline. Digital nomad visa is structured for long-term flexibility. Okay, so the initial visa approval is from outside of Spain up to 1 year. If you're applying from Spain, maximum 3 years, depending on your contract, depending on your certificate of coverage. Okay, typical, you get the first 3-year approval, and then when you renew, you get 2 more years, totaling 5 years. That makes you eligible for the long-term residency. Now, when you apply for the TIE, you get your TIE. The start of your TIE should be the start of your residency. Now, when do you renew? Well, when the TIE expires, you go 60 days before. That's when you can start renewing your residency, okay? Very important. Don't wait until the last minute. Apply for the renewal immediately, because if you have any errors, any problems, anything that you need to fix, you still have days to do it, okay? Don't wait till the end. This is very important, okay? Remember also that dual passport holders or passport holders of those countries in red, Ibero-American countries, Philippines, Andorra, Portugal, they can benefit from a 2-year fast track for residency application for the Spanish citizenship, okay? Normally, citizens of the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and all those countries in gray have to wait 10 years. But if you hold the passport of any of those red countries, it goes down to 2 years. If you marry a Spaniard, it's only 1 year. Okay, if you are of origin, Sephardi origin, it's 2 years as well. So have that into account, because sometimes people can apply for the citizenship earlier than the long-term residency, saving time. What's different when you renew your visa? As we mentioned before, it's not just a formality, it's not just paperwork, but it's almost like reapplying. Okay, so you need to be very organized. You need still to meet all the income, your work, and legal requirements. You will need to provide updated income proof for the past 6 to 12 months, updated criminal record certificate from Spain, proof of continued remote work and business activity, confirmation of Spanish address via the empadronamiento, and has to be updated. It has a validity of 3 months, and inform the UGE if any changes happen. Like, for example, if you lost your job or you change employers, etc., UGE needs to be informed as well. The issues that are common for the renewal: income drops below the required level, freelancers fail to show consistent activity, delays with paperwork or expired documents, new apostille requirements that we mentioned now that many people are now aware of, gaps in health coverage, as we mentioned also. And other ones is gaps in residency permit. Okay, this is a big one. Okay, like you need to have a strategy on how you're going to jump to another residency permit so that it is uninterrupted in the last 5 years before applying for the long-term residency. You can't have a one-day gap in residency permit. So you need to have a strategy laid out so that when your residency, your digital nomad residency permit expires, immediately you have a different residency status that makes it uninterrupted. So it's important you have different pathways. You need to talk to a legal advisor to study the different ways that you can achieve this. Okay, like for example, several people, they got their digital nomad visa via certificate of coverage, but that certificate of coverage expires, and what they choose is to become an Autónomo a little bit before, okay, and then they change the status from employee to Autónomo without losing their residency status. This is a way to do it in that case, okay. Other things to mention is we mentioned that the long-term residency has minimum stay requirements or maximum time outside of Spain of 10 months in the period of 5 years. But also if you're applying for citizenship, especially for fast-track beneficiaries, remember you cannot be outside of Spain more than 90 days per each of the 2 years before of applying for the citizenship. Now, some smart tips for a smooth renewal. Be organized from day one. Keep your income statements, invoices, client letters, social security payment records if self-employed. Monitor your income to ensure that you meet the threshold every single month. Update your empadronamiento if you move. This is important because it can take weeks, if not months, to get a new empadronamiento. Once you have empadronado, it is quite easy to get a new volante de empadronamiento, let's say a copy of an updated empadronamiento, but if you need to register in a new address, it can take time. Important, set yourself reminders to begin the renewal process 2 months before the expiration of your TA card. Gather the documents that you need, okay, all the apostilles from translations, etc., at least 3 months before. Get the background check from Spain with no pending legal issues, okay? This is very important as well. And what do you do? We mentioned before, when your certificate of coverage or A1 is expiring, be careful with that. Even if you get the residency permit for a longer time, pay attention, because if you don't have certificate of coverage, you're not, let's say, complying with all the requirements of this visa, okay? When it expires, you have different options. You either apply for a renewal in your home country, which is not always granted, okay, a renewal of the certificate of coverage. Many people cannot renew it, and they need to change their status or find a different way to maintain their residency. Switching to Autónomo, as I mentioned before, and register with Spanish Social Security. Convincing your employer to register for Spain's Social Security, which gives you Beckham law eligibility. Leave Spain temporarily, which may reset the clock for long-term residency. Consider immigration pathways such as arraigo. Okay, this is when you're applying as illegal, okay, in Spain. Even if you were legal before, after 2 years of staying in Spain, you can apply using this figure called arraigo. Switching to a non-lucrative visa, this can also be a possibility, okay, but then you cannot work remotely. Changing to ordinary work permits, working for yourself, or working for a company that is ready to sponsor you, etc., etc., okay? Some UGR renewal rejections have been based on the expired coverage, okay? And Spain expects continuity, so it's important that you plan ahead. And with this, we made it to the end of the presentation. Remember that you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. I send you a weekly newsletter every Monday. You can watch the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, like the video. If you're watching the video right now on YouTube, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Read the blog posts, more than 2,000 articles. And of course, if you haven't done so yet, please join the Facebook group, my dedicated Spanish Digital Nomad Visa group with nearly 19,000 members, super active group where you can get first-hand experiences. There are experts in the group that can answer your questions. It's so useful to be part of a community. You can also join my other webinars. I have 6 webinars, okay? And lately I also released a new webinar where I added as a guest Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Abogados. who are expert immigration lawyers, experts in digital nomad visa, and in any other procedure, and expert also in helping people stay in Spain for the long term, like developing strategies to stay in Spain without making costly mistakes. So this is very interesting and important. And in my opinion, you don't have to use my personally vetted experts, but at the very least, please promise me that you will engage at least consulting with an hour for an hour, one immigration expert, one tax advisor. Those two consultations, I think they are very important when you are deciding to move to Spain, so that you know what to expect without any unwanted surprises. And if you need expert recommendations, I have personally vetted all my recommended partners on Spainguru.es. You can find them right there. Also, you can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. You can read my reviews. People say, like, it's incredible. This guy answered me with everything I needed. He pointed me in the right direction. You can read the reviews there. I always answer my emails. I always help you, people, at least pointing you in the direction of a community or information online or a video, or experts that can help you with that thing. So definitely count on me. Send me a hello, Spainguru.es, comment on this video as well. But the email is the best because I never miss an email. Okay. And remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal advice. The requirements that we have listed here are not official. Always check the official requirements and go with legal help. I'm not an immigration lawyer, so definitely go with experts. So now we're going to the Q&A session. And if you haven't done so yet, or you have to leave earlier, please leave a review on Trustpilot. There's a button there on the top of the screen that will redirect you to Trustpilot. It takes only 2 seconds to leave a review there, and it will make me extremely happy and help others find this content. Thank you everyone for joining today. First of all, I have one question. It says, if I am in Spain and I need to get a certificate of coverage, but I've been here for a month and I switch to 1099 and then go back to get a certificate of coverage, so to save time waiting for the paperwork. Let me see. This is something I would consult with an advisor that knows exactly what consequences could have from you, for you, okay, doing this switching, because once you do it, it's hard to go back and it has many implications. So really, please do a consultation with an expert. I'm sorry, but I can't really answer you this question because I could be wrong, and I prefer not to tell you the wrong answer for this question. Unfortunately, it's a bit too difficult for me. This situation that you are mentioning. Okay, so yeah, that would be my answer. I'm sorry, but I cannot be very helpful. You can find expert lawyers on Spainguru.es and elsewhere, but always make sure that if you're engaging with a professional, make sure that they know about the digital nomad visa, because it is a quite new visa. Has only been 2 years with us since 2023, and it has been evolving and changing. And so being updated and being experienced with this visa is very important. So yes, make sure that you are talking with someone who knows their work with this visa, and that has proven experience. My partners I have done that vetting for you. And but of course, yes, definitely check that with an experienced immigration lawyer. That's it. That was the only question. I really appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much for being here. I will upload this video to YouTube very soon. You will receive the recording. If you're watching it on YouTube, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you around very soon. Thank you so much and have a wonderful week. Goodbye.
Oh, and one more thing. Apparently YouTube says you're gonna love watching this video right here. I think you should watch it.